Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So let's continue on with our study of the fragments in Arabic. So, as we said before, there are four fragments in the Arabic language. The first is the prepositional fragment, which we'll be studying today. The second is the association fragment. The third is a pointing fragment. And the fourth is a descriptive fragment. All of these we'll be studying in the coming weeks, inshallah. So, when it comes to a prepositional fragment, it's important to remember that there's actually two main parts to it. And one of the things that we're going to learn with all the fragments is that similar to the properties of an ism and to the ism, fa'il, and harf, they all have signs that are associated to it. So when you learn the sign of that particular fragment, whether or not you know the translation, you can actually figure out that what you're dealing with is a certain type of fragment. So when it comes to the prepositional fragment, there are two parts. The first part is the preposition itself, which in Arabic is known as the harfu jar. And we're going to go through a list of those words. And once you know those words, essentially you know all of the prepositions as they come. Now the second part, which comes after the harfu jar, or the preposition, is an ism, and it will come directly after it. And as the name harfu jar entails, that harf that comes will force the ism that comes after it to take a state of jar. So we'll get into that a little bit further, but first let's look at the 17 harfu jar or prepositions in Arabic. So they are ba, ta, kaf, lam, waw, mundu, mudh, khala, rubba, hasha, min, ada, fi, an, ala, hatta, ila. Now, what you'll see below each one of these prepositions, all 17 of them, is that there's a particular translation. So like for ba, which is usually you'll see it as bi, it means with. Or for mundu, it means since. Or for fi, it means in. Now, more often than not, the translation actually, when it's put into context, when you see these words, will not actually be with this, right? So they can have multiple translations. So fi, for example, can sometimes mean in, sometimes mean on, it can sometimes mean to. That will actually be dictated by the context. And we'll teach you in due time how to read the context so that you're able to figure out what the actual meaning of the harf is. One of the secrets of the Arabic language is actually learning the different translations of the huruf and when it is appropriate to use the harfu jar, right? But for now, these are actually just baseline definitions that are good to just know, and we're going to keep referring back to these simple definitions every time that we deal with these words within the context of this book or this review series, right? And there's particular words here that are important to really know, like particularly the ba you'll see a lot, kaf you'll see a lot, lam you'll see a lot, fi you'll see a lot, an you'll see a lot, ala and ila and min. The other ones not so much, because for some of them there tends to be a little bit more intricacy in the way that they're used, and we'll study them in further lessons or in further courses in a deeper manner. But for now, it's important just to really memorize all 17 of these and the baseline definition that is associated with them. And the critical thing to understand is that every time you see one of these 17 prepositions or harfu jar in Arabic, you'll know that you're dealing now with a prepositional fragment. So let's take a look at a prepositional fragment, like some examples of it. So the first we have is fi kitabin, which means in a book, right? So fi is our harfu jar, which means in. Then after it comes an ism, which is going to be forced into a state of jar because of the harfu jar. So you have harfu jar and ism majroor, right? And these two parts together are now going to be one fragment. It's important that the way that we look at letters that come together to form one word, we should also look at words that come together to form a fragment as one fragment. It's now one unit together in grammar, right? And that's something that we're going to hopefully get accustomed to as we look at different fragments and really starting to look at these as just one unit. Another example, ala al-bayti. See, it has kasra here to represent that it's in a state of jar, and it's in a state of jar because of ala, which is a harfu jar. So we have harfu jar and then ism majroor. And this would mean on the house, right? And then we have kattalibi. So it's talibi here because of the kaf, which means like. So it would be translated as like the student. And we have harfu jar and it's ism majroor. So the ism majroor literally means the ism that's being forced into a state of jar. Why is it being forced into a state of jar? Because of the harfu jar, right? Then the fourth example, we have min al-masjidi, which means from the masjid, right? And once again, we have our harfu jar and then our ism majrur, which is in a state of jar. So just a important reminder with this example here, and also with the next, that when you have a harfu jar and the word that it's attached to, or the word that it's impacting, sorry, the ism majrur, is a partially flexible word, then just always keep in mind, as we learned before, that the state of jar will not be shown with the kasra, rather it will be shown with the fatha, right? So we have here harfu jar and then ism majrur, right? So li fatimata, right? So for Fatima. And again, just because it has a fatha on the end does not mean that it's not in a state of jar. Rather, it is a female name, and we know that female names, as we learned before, are partially flexible, meaning that they will not take kasra when in a state of jar. Then the last example, an Aishata, which means from Aisha, and you'll see this a lot in hadith books at the beginning of a hadith narration. Now we have our harfu jar, and then after, once again, ism majrur, and it's Aishata, with the state of jar being represented with a fatha because it's a partially flexible word. Now it's important once again to keep in mind you have your harfu jar and then you have the ism coming after it, right after it, that's in a state of jar, that's been forced into that state of jar. And together they make a prepositional fragment, which we'd call harfu jar, ism majrur, or some people for short, when they say it, because harfu jar, ism majrur is a bit of a mouthful, they'll say jar majrur, jar majrur, as in harfu jar, ism majrur, right? Jar majrur. Now, prepositions or harfu jars can have pronouns attached to them, just like how we learned before that an ism can have it, such as kitabuhu, so his book, or kitabuhuma, their book, right? So in this case, it would be minhu, so from him, minhuma, from them, minhum, from them, minha, from her, minhuma, from them, minhunna, from them, minka, so from you, minkuma, from both of you, minkum, from all of you, minki, from you, minkuma, from both of you, minkunna, from all of you, minni, from me, minna, minna, right? So from us. Now, there are particular scenarios where when there is a harfu jar that has a ya before it with a sukun on it, and then you go ahead and you attach a pronoun to it, rather than being the usual dhamma that we see on the end, it will be converted to a kasra case, right? So this is simply being done for phonetics. It's not being done for any other reason. This is not a grammar-based thing. It's just fi, he sounds better than fi, hu, right? Alayhi sounds better than alayhu. Ilayhi sounds better than ilayhu, right? So it's a small little thing to keep in mind, not to be psyched out by this and think that you're dealing with some grammatical anomaly. Rather, it's a phonetics thing. So it would just be read as fihi, fihima, fihim, fiha, right? Fihima, fihinna, right? And then the rest are the same. So fika, fikuma, fikum, fiki, fikuma, fikunna. Then when you get to the anna, it's a little bit different. It becomes fiya. So what's happening here is that with the harfu jar fi, when you add the ya of ana, right? So when ana turns into an attached pronoun, it's a ya. So like if I want to say my house, it would be kitabi, be my house. If you were to add the ya to the fi and add it regularly, it would be like an elongated fi. It'd be fi, which wouldn't work. So the way that the Arabs get around this is that they turn it into a ya with a fatha and an elongation. So it becomes fiya, fiya. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then finally with the nahnu, it's fina. So this is in essence a really quick rundown of the huruf al-jar, which is the prepositional particles. It's important to just try and get these down. And one of the main takeaways from this lesson is really just to memorize those 17. Bata, kaf, lam, waw, mundu, mudh, khala, rubba, hasha, min, ada, fi, an, ala, hatta, ila. If you can get those down, know that every single time that you see it, you're dealing with a prepositional fragment, and the ism that comes directly after it will be in a state of jar because it's being impacted by it. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.